Hello, my name is Luke Harding. I was very amused by Gary Kasparov this morning when he mentioned this latest US-Russian spy drama, which I was reading about in the New York Times under the headline, From Russia with Wig, which was the headline today, because I know the genre, and it kind of reminded me of my own experiences in Moscow when I arrived in Russia as the Guardian's bureau chief in January 2007. And pretty immediately, within about 3 or 4 months, I was plunged into a similarly badly written spy thriller. Think Skyfall, think James Bond, but much worse, with kind of repetitive dialogue, ridiculous characters, and a kind of shoddy veneer of amateurism, if you like. And what happened in my case was that in April 2007, 2 of my colleagues interviewed the late Boris Berezovsky, and Berezovsky, in typically self-aggrandizing style, told them that he was plotting nothing less than a Russian revolution against Vladimir Putin. And I simply phoned Mr. Putin's press spokesman, Dmitry Peskov. I got a quote from him. And the next day, the Guardian rather excitably put this story on the front page. I am plotting Russian revolution, says Boris Berezovsky. And from this moment onwards, the kind of sky fell on my head in Moscow, and I found myself in this curious drama. There were sort of numerous manifestations of this. I had physical surveillance. I had unpromising young men wearing cheap leather jackets and brand shoes who would follow me into Moscow cafes and bars. So, if I'm sitting there, they would come and sit like this and dump a big bag on the table with I guess, some kind of recording device. So that was kind of more Inspector Clouseau than anything else, sort of James Bond. Then I had electronic surveillance. My phone was bugged. Someone ransacked my inbox of my Gmail account. I was sort of reading all of my emails. Whenever I made a joke about Putin or mentioned Alexander Litvinenko, who'd been murdered in London shortly before I arrived, I would hear or like this. And so that's kind of common practice for most Western journalists, human rights activists, Russian journalists in Moscow. But additionally, and I think most kind of egregiously, the FSB, Vladimir Putin's spy agency, broke repeatedly into the flat where I was living with my wife and 2 small kids, and they didn't steal the TV like kind of conventional burglars. They did all sorts of demonstrative, spooky stuff. So they would cut our central heating in the middle of a Moscow winter, which is no joke. They deleted the photo of my family on the laptop. They left the window of my son's bedroom wide open, which we double locked when we lived on the 10th floor of a Moscow apartment block, with the clear sort of dark symbolism that just maybe he would fall out and have an accident. And in addition to this, I was summoned by the FSB to Lefortovo prison, which is their sort of pre-detention center, a kind of lugubrious place, not marked on any map in Moscow. And I turned up there with my lawyer. I was advised to get a lawyer to see this forbidding building. I don't know if anyone's seen The Life of Others, the great film about the Stasi, but it sort of resembled Stasi HQ in Berlin. Walked inside. Perhaps there was a reception room about the size of this sort of stage, but there were no tables and chairs, and the sort of psychological games were immediately beginning. There was nowhere to sort of be. And there was a kind of mirrored window, an oblong window. So the sort of FSB spy could see me, but I couldn't see him. All I saw was the hand that took my passport and mobile phone. And I noted the hand was very hairy, so a sort of hairy hand took the passport and phone. And then we proceeded upstairs through these kind of etiolated corridors, and these old KGB-style cameras followed us around, going like this. Got to room 306, where there was a Major Kuzmin. Well, that was his nom de plume, but that probably wasn't his real name, who interrogated me about this ridiculous story. And that wasn't interesting, but what I take away from that encounter was on his table there was a glass, and on the glass were 4 initials, and the initials were OGPU, Cheka, OGPU, KGB, FSB. In other words, the initials of Russia's secret spy organizations, beginning with the Cheka, the sort of Lenin secret police. And what I thought was interesting was that this sort of really showed a kind of continuity of mentality and methods, that even though the Cold War had supposedly finished, that Vladimir Putin, the man in the Kremlin, was wheeling out this really rather tired, hackneyed playbook. And just briefly, I had on and off harassment for about 3.5 years, and then finally, I was involved in the whole WikiLeaks project with Julian Assange, whom I know has spoken at this forum. And when I flew back to Moscow 2 years ago, having published stories about really Putin's Mafia state, based on confidential US State Department cables, I got to passport control, handed over my passport, and the lady there from the Federal Migration Service, part of the FSB, typed in my details and went like this, did a kind of crazy double take, handed my passport back to another official who reappeared very briefly after about 7 or 8 minutes and said, "Для вас, Россия закрыта," which means, for you, Russia is closed. And I said, "Почему? Why?" And he said, "Я не знаю." I don't know. "Вы что-то сделали?" Did you do something? And I said, "Нет, я ничего не сделал." You know, I didn't do anything. And at the end of this illuminating Socratic conversation, I was bundled back onto a plane, deported from Moscow, and thus ended my career in Russia. But just to wind up, I would say that I tell you this for 2 reasons, not because I'm James Bond or in any way heroic, but because I think what happened to me is emblematic of the dark place that Russia is at the moment after 13 years of Putin. Really is a kind of thuggish kleptocracy ruled by a paranoid, largely ex-KGB group. And secondly, because Russian human rights activists, journalists, who are the hero of this drama, suffer similarly. And I have a kind of fantasy in my head that I think Putin will be there for some time, but at some stage, in a decade or two, possibly on my Zimmer frame, I will be able to return to Moscow and walk down a street named after Anna Politkovskaya, or Natasha Estemirova, or Stas Markelov, or Anastasia Baburova, all brave journalists, human rights campaigners have been shot. And I really hope I live to see that moment. Thank you.